I love this. I love this. Poor Jeremiah. He's angry with God, and this is a daring and bold accusation. The two Hebrew words. The first one on the left, I have it in Hebrew first, and then transliterated to what it would sound like today in English, in the way we would speak, and that is duped. And then the second one is you were too strong. Now, the reason I'm making a point of them is both of them are really rooted in sexual connotations. So the first one, duped, is really more like a seduction, and the word or the usage of the word is so specific that it's like a seduction of a virgin. And too strong, you were too strong for me, partners with that. So there's this overtone of someone innocent that was tricked, and he is mad. I need to tell you what happened right before this section of Jeremiah. The priest Pashur smote, is what the Bible says, smote Jeremiah. Now what that means is he had him arrested, given 40 lashes, and put in the stocks overnight. And he's just out of that humiliation, and he is ticked. So this just comes, this huge blaming of God goes out to God. And so he uses the words, that's why I wanted to give you the connotation of duped and too strong. He is angry, and he uses those words deliberately. And this is why. He feels tricked, and he feels violated, because what he understood his mission to be would be to root up and tear down, to build and to plant, and the only thing he's been doing so far is rooting up and tearing down. If he even saw a little bit of building up and planting, he wouldn't feel like this. But everything has been connected with rooting up and tearing down, and he's so angry. And yet, this whole rest of this short passage, this is what's so cool about this. When prophets speak, this is the clearest, one of the clearest in the Hebrew scriptures, one of the clearest proclamations that when God uses a prophet, it is not a human expression, but hear me now, a real intervention by God of the person. And these last two, almost like stanzas, are filled with that. So he's so mad, he wants to go pout. He wants to be quiet. Go get yourself another prophet, is what's in his heart. But look at the power of God's intervening in Jeremiah's life and using Jeremiah as a mouthpiece. It is not of Jeremiah that he is a prophet. It is of God. So look at what I highlighted. I must cry out. That's why I highlighted there. And in the next one, I'm not going to talk about it anymore, but it's like fire burning in my, that is such a strong phrase there. That's such a strong simile that if you let yourself, you can feel it. You can feel that. That's how God's intervening in Jeremiah's life feels. He can't stop if he wants to. And look at the last thing. I grow weary trying to hold it in. I cannot endure it. Those words are good. This translation is pretty good. I grow weary holding. I can't even endure it. I can't stand it. Because so this, all of what I just said, pow, that's what I want you to hear on Sunday. Hopefully. And here's the good part of this. The good part of this is this kind of dialogue with God is only important if you realize that it is not a sign of disrespect. It is a sign of taking our relationship with God seriously. When we're in pain, being honest is more important than being polite. Now think about that regarding your prayer. When you're mad, and you're mad with God, two different things, both possible, obviously, both probable. What is your prayer like then? This is a perfect thing, I think, a perfect section to go back to when you just don't know what to do because you're just so upset. Then let that help you trust the relationship and the love that would allow you to face God with this, to be bold enough and daring enough for that. Okay, then let's go to the gospel, please. For you to understand the power of this gospel, you need to remember, okay, well, we're kind of plugging along through the Gospel of Matthew. So what just happened was Peter saying to Jesus, you are the Christ, the Son of the living God. And then Jesus is saying, oh, this is big, Peter. You're my rock. Okay, now what we're going to hear Sunday happens right at the end of that. You have to remember that or you'll miss the power. Jesus began to show his disciples that he must go to Jerusalem and suffer greatly from the elders, the chief priests, and the scribes, and be killed. And on the third day be raised. Okay, I want to stop there because apparently it is easier, and I think this is probably true for us too, it is easier to receive the revelation of Jesus as the Messiah than to receive the revelation of the Paschal mystery, the death and resurrection and ascension of Jesus Christ. At least that's what Jesus is hitting. That's the wall Jesus is hitting now. Then Peter took Jesus aside and began to rebuke him. God forbid, Lord, no such thing shall ever happen to you. He turned and said to Peter, get behind me, Satan. That's why I highlighted that. He just called Peter his rock, literally just called Peter his rock, and now he's calling him Satan. Very different flavor, right? First of all, it's very clear that Jesus' emotional state has changed. He knows what's going to come if he doesn't be quiet. And second, Jesus has been trying to get the apostles to understand who he really is, what Messiah really means, what Christos really implies. And they're not having it. And he gently, well, this one not so gently, but he's trying to just say it over and over again. You know, just that's what you have to know. That does Jesus really mean Peter's Satan? No, but look what Peter did. Peter did exactly what Satan did in the temptation in the desert. Because Satan said to Jesus, all the things, the three temptations, Satan was really saying to Jesus, oh, you use your divine powers and you won't have to suffer any of this. And Peter is saying the same thing. You don't have to do any of this. So Peter doesn't think Jesus doesn't think Peter is Satan, but he certainly has a vivid memory of the pain of those temptations from Satan. And then he says, you are an obstacle to me. That's the word in Greek, scandalon. Do you see it's scandal, isn't it? That's where we get the word scandal. I put it in transliterated Greek, and then that's what the Greek is underneath it. But here's the important thing. That is translated something you stumble over. I think that enriches the understanding of this. If the definition of scandalon is something you trip over, he's saying, get behind me, Satan. You are something I trip over on my moving into what is ordained for me by God. If I don't weaken and if I don't become quiet, it's kind of like Jeremiah. Jesus can't be quiet with what he knows of the divine because he is of the divine, right? And so just like Jeremiah, he couldn't be quiet if he wanted to, but he knows what that's probably going to bring. So he literally says to Peter, you're something I'm tripping over and I don't need that right now. You're thinking not as God does, but as human beings do. Then Jesus said to his disciples, whoever wishes to come after me must deny himself. Okay, now this is kind of an important thing. That's why I highlighted it. That doesn't mean that you're supposed to not like let go of something physical. It means that you renounce any claim of your own that you have other than your complete dependence on God. That's what deny yourself means. I only exist as a child of God, and that's who I am. That's who I am. That's who I am. And being faithful to God means acting out of who I am. And so what Jesus is inviting anybody who reads this and his disciples in the original part, he's saying, come with me by means of being faithful to your relationship with me. I really love that. Come with me by means of being faithful to your relationship with me. That's in fact the call to all of us. Now Luke added the word daily to take up his cross. So Luke said, whoever wishes to come after me must deny himself, take up his cross daily and follow me. But Matthew deliberately doesn't, because Matthew is trying to echo the martyrdom that the early Christians are suffering. So that, in other words, it's very stark, because crucifixion was the way that political subversives were executed. And to claim, other than the emperor, that someone other than the emperor was divine, was considered seditious, and you were executed for that political. Okay, so then, for whoever wishes to save his life will lose it, but whoever loses his life for my sake will find it. What profit would there be for one to gain the whole world and forfeit his life? Or what can one give in exchange for his life? For the Son of Man will come with his angels in his Father's glory. That's the parousia. That's the kingdom coming. That's the end of the world. That's what he's referring to there. And then he will repay all according to his conduct. Okay, now, does any of this mean that we are supposed to seek out pain, or that pain is good? No! What is being said here, of course, and you knew that that was true, he's saying, if you realize, if your faith is personal enough, the same kind of personal enough that allowed Jeremiah to be so bold in getting angry with God, if your faith can be that personal, then you realize that your connection to God will allow you to carry any pain. Because no matter what you go through, excuse me, no matter what you go through, you have a personal faith, then you know that you are personally known by God, and that God cares about excuse me, anything and everything that happens to you. That God is present where you live and where you suffer. You don't go out and look for pain, and pain is not good. What's good is knowing your personal connection with God, that defines your faith, and nothing can touch that. Nothing can touch that. We tend to feel, speaking of Augustine defined sin in his Latin writing as incurvatus in se. It means turned into yourself. In se. In se means into yourself. Incur, it even sounds like that, doesn't it, a little bit? Incurvatus in se. Curved into yourself so that you're the center. Your ego and the narrow concerns of your ego are what motivates you only. What Jesus is saying in this pericope is move out of that old mind and make that curve go out. Not in say, but ex say, out of yourself, more and more and more and more broadly. I think for a lot of us, and this isn't steady, it's at different times in our life, I think we feel like if we believe, then maybe it should be smooth sailing, or we should be stable, or we should have, our life should be stable, or we should have equilibrium, that's the byproducts of it. But anybody who has been deeply in love knows that it's more like harrowing experience than it is smooth sailing, with ups and downs. But what I'd like to say before we take questions and close with a prayer is I'd like to read this to you, which kind of, at least for me, it painted a picture of what Jesus is inviting to because of our identity as child of God. A famous Italian violin maker was known to carefully select the wood for his violins from the north side of tree trunks. When people questioned him about this, he pointed out that it was the north side of the tree that faced the brunt of most storms. It was that side of the tree that was buffeted by winds and rains, and as a result, that wood was stronger and more resilient. He found that if he shaped the violins from the wood on the north side of the tree, the tone was richer, the timber was richer. Therefore, when winds came and rain struck, and one could hear the trees of the forest groan under the violence of the storms, the violin maker would smile and say, "I love that sound. It's the sound of trees learning to be violins." I love that. And I think that would be the only way, must be, the only way that we make sense of handling the pain that comes as part of life. Mm-hmm. Never without God, never seeking it, never saying that it's good, but this is no slow and steady ride. This is an up and down that will get us to heaven.
Mm-hmm.